the following webinar protocol. For each participant ID, please use your real name following with your origin of institution. All of participants are expected to mute the audio and only unmute the video during the event. We cordially invite you to take your own firm and comfort seat in your own room, and please avoid the backlight. Make sure that you have a good and stable internet connection. If you have an earphone or headset, we recommend you to use it so that your voice can clearly and loudly to be heard. During the Q&A discussion session, all participants, please use the chat box to deliver the questions. Thank you for your cooperation and consideration.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Guest Lecture Series on SDGs today, Tuesday, 20th of April, 2021. I am Oriza from ITAS Global Engagement, and I will be your Master of Ceremony this afternoon. Thank you for joining our Guest Lecture Series on SDGs today. Before we start our agenda, let me inform you of some important information for today's event. First, please fill your attendance at bit.ly/attendance_GLS SDGs. Our committee also sent the attendance link in the Zoom chat room. For participants who wish to get an e-certificate and stamp, please fill the attendance at latest of 15 minutes after the session starts. Second, participants who wish to ask questions during the question and answer session, please send your questions to intip.in/Q&A/GLS-SDGs. The link for asking questions is sent in the chat room as well. You can ask directly by clicking the raise hand feature. Ladies and gentlemen, this guest lecture series on SDGs is dedicated as a form of appreciation and commemorating the 60th anniversary of the Institut Teknologi 10 November Surabaya. Today's guest lecture brings the topic of Has the Pandemic Unleashed a Wave of Cyber Attacks? And Intelligent Low-Rate Cyber Attack Detection that will be delivered by our honorable speakers, Associate Professor Chaminda Hewage from Cardiff Metropolitan University, and Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo from the Research Center of IoT and Defense System Tech of ITAS. And today's lecture will be moderated by Dr. Rizka Sholika from Institut Teknologi 10 November. Before we start our agenda, allow me to deliver our schedule today as follows. First, we have the opening. Second, introduction to moderator. Third, lecture session by Associate Professor Chaminda Hewage, followed by question and answer. Fourth, lecture session by Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo, followed by question and answer session. Fifth, certificate awarding, and lastly, closing. Now, before we proceed to the next agenda, let me introduce our moderator. Dr. Rizka Sholika completed her bachelor's degree in the Department of Informatics ITAS and attained her doctor's degree in the Department of Informatics ITAS as well. Also, she was awarded with the PMDSU Scholarship Program from the Indonesian Ministry of Education and Culture. Now, without further ado, let's proceed to the main agenda. To the moderator, Dr. Rizka Sholika, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Orisa, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to be a moderator for today the GLS SDG session. So we have two amazing speakers for today's session. The first speaker is Associate Professor Chaminda Hewage, and the second speaker we have Dr. Baskoro Pratomo. So before we start the first session, let me introduce the profile of Associate Professor Chaminda Hewage from Cardiff Metropolitan University. Associate Professor Chaminda Hewage got the postgraduate certificate in higher education learning and teaching, and he also got bachelor for an honor degree in electrical and information engineering, University of Ruhuna, Sri Lanka, and he also got the PhD multimedia communication from University of Surrey, UK. For the professional experience, from 2009 to 2015, he is a senior research fellow in research and teaching Kingston University, London. And from 2015 till now, he is a reader in data security, Cardiff Metropolitan University. He got a subject expertise such as data and information security, data science, data visualization, multimedia processing and communication, and cybersecurity and networking. Okay, for Associate Professor Chaminda Hewage, time is yours. Are you here, Prof. Chami?
Thank you, Dr. Rizka. Okay. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Yeah. Can you see my screen as well?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning if you are in Europe. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Dr. Rizka, and thanks for this opportunity to deliver this guest lecture as well. So as Rizka mentioned, I'm Chaminda Hewage. I'm a reader in data security here at Cardiff Metropolitan University. Today in this talk, I'm going to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and whether it has increased the cybersecurity attacks, as well as what were the opportunities created by the pandemic that are favoring the cyber criminals, so that so we can figure out what is happening, what are the favoring conditions, and then we can figure out why there's an increase of cybersecurity attack as claimed by many people, as well as based on our own research. So before start, I will give you a brief introduction to myself. I'm a reader in data security at Cardiff Met, as well as I am the program director for computer security for the university, and I'm also working as a cyber first ambassador for National Cybersecurity Center in UK, helping young people like university students, the school students to get first-hand experience in cybersecurity. My PhD is from University of Surrey, and I have been working in academia in different universities, for example, Surrey, Kingston, and now I'm at Cardiff. So let's go back to the direct talk. As we all know, we are going through a global pandemic. I mean, I would have been lucky if I could say we went through a pandemic. No, it is not the case. We are still going through a pandemic. You may heard about the India situation in India, the high number of cases happening even now, and in Canada as well. They are struggling, and some European countries. So if you look at in 2020, so as you can see here, in April 2020, about 90%, 90 countries were in lockdown. Half of the humanity were in lockdown. So what were the side effects? What were the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown? So we started working from home. We started attending the universities and schools from home, online learning, distance learning, online shopping. So these conditions make opportunities for the cyber criminals, because most of us were online, and it was for most of us, it was not a choice. It was, we were pushed to the wall to choose that we had to work from online. We didn't have VPN connections. We didn't have the security. We were using our tablets, mobile phones, laptops to connect to our corporate network, to the other systems and so on. So we were increasingly, we were online. Our online presence were increasing. So that made the opportunity for the cyber criminals to expand their activities. We'll see while I'm going through the presentation whether they were using the same techniques or they introduced new techniques for the COVID-19 itself. If you look at other crimes, for example, petty crimes like home break-in, burglary, they have been reduced. We have seen statistics because all people are home, so they can't break into your house because you are at home. But the cyber criminals, it is an opportunity for them because you are online and sometimes you are not using the right tools and the secure connections. So there's a high chance that they can get into your system and steal your personal and important sensitive data. So these are the few things that happened during the pandemic: working from home, home schooling, uh, online shopping, increased use of internet and social media. I'm sure most of you end up in Facebook, Instagram, and few other social media applications during these lockdowns while you are stuck at home. And they called it as an infodemic, so information pandemic, because WHO called this specific word because so many information were out there, and some are correct information, some are incorrect information. So we were overloaded by information, so they call it as an infodemic as well. So let's see some stats around. So this is in July 2020. As you can see, how many people spend more time on their devices during this pandemic. So for the population of 16 to 64, you can see 70% population is spend more time on their smartphone, mobile phone, and 47% is spend more time on the laptop computers, PC, tablet, smart TV, media streaming, game console. Luckily, it is 18%. I wonder what the teenagers were doing this during the lockdown. Smart speakers and smart watches as well. So you can see increased activity during the pandemic. So this is related to July 2020. And let's see some of the communication platforms. So today we are using Zoom. So as you can see, in July 2020, there were 300 million meeting participants per day using Zoom. So as you can remember, at the very beginning of Zoom, there were some security loopholes like displaying the meeting ID on the screen and so on. And this is the 100 million Google Meet per day. Teams, I think some of the universities are using Teams, Skype, and WebEx kind of platform. So this increase indicates that we are online, and the cyber criminals use these opportunities to hack into these services as well. So this is this news I read I think a few days back. I think in a competition, the participants were managed to hack both Microsoft Teams and Zoom application. So there are possibilities, even though they are not exploited. So there's a possibility that our communication channels like Teams and Zoom can be accessed by the cyber criminals. So this is a bit about TikTok, the social media platform used by mostly the younger generation. So you can see the 800 million users were using TikTok, and the percentage wise in the population and the number of downloads and the female and male percentage. So I think this was taken in July 2020 before India banned TikTok. So India had half of the TikTok users. So, and even in America, they were planning to ban, saying that they may invade privacy. They may capture our images, videos, and they will use it for creating deepfakes and duplicating your biometric credentials like face images and other details. So we have wrote some articles around what would happen if they steal our face images, because these are biometric information. For example, we use passwords, something we have, tokens, and something we are, that are biometrics for our authentication to the system. So what would happen if someone steal your biometrics? So they can't be replaced like passwords, aren't they? So you are in real trouble. So if you're using a fingerprint, you may use 10 fingerprints. After that all 10 gone, then there's no way you can recover those fingerprints. So we have discussed these security and privacy concerns of biometric, because recently there was a case that one of the biometric database was leaked to the outside, and it has data from UK Metropolitan Police and few other high-profile organizations, as well as what they suspect that TikTok is doing, and some other applications like FaceApp. They are using your images to create deep fakes and FaceApp applications. So they may not necessarily use it to create embed another image onto your face, but rather they use your images to train their models. Yeah. So these are the real risks, and so these are the security concerns as well around these social media applications. So this is a e-commerce dashboard. So how many of us use e-commerce websites and so on. So this is in July 2020. As you can see, there's no increase of traffic for the e-commerce websites. Same for the session duration, it remains same compared to the pre-COVID situation. But if you look at the number of transactions, they increased by 19%. I am sure that most of us ordering online, Amazon, eBay, and click and collect. So you don't visit the store because of the pandemic, and you can go and collect from one location. So and the number of conversions happen during these online shopping, because sometimes we go for just for browsing the data, browsing the product, but some end up buying the product. So that is called a conversion. So you can see, compared to the pre-COVID situation, 21% increase of conversions. So that means if they go to Amazon, they may end up buying more than the pre-COVID era. And this is about shopping online. How many of them would continue to do online shopping after COVID-19? I don't know when it would end. But as you can see, the younger generation will 51% said in this particular study, they will continue to engage in online shopping. And if you go to the more younger generation, the more older generation, you can see the percentage of increase is much less compared to the younger generation, 16 to 24. So let's see a bit more stats from working from home. So in April 2020 in UK, so these stats are from Office of National Statistics in UK, 46%, 47, almost 47% people in employment did some work at home. So 47% of UK population were doing some work from home. And out of them, the 86% did so because of COVID-19. Because there were some system admins and a few other people working from home even before COVID-19. But this 86% did so because of COVID-19 impact. And if you look at the London stats, so about 57% population were working from home during the peak of the pandemic, peak of the first wave of the pandemic. So how are we vulnerable when we are working from home? As I said, it was not a choice for some of us. So we were suddenly asked to work from home. We didn't have the VPN or secured laptops, and we don't have the office. We are not in office. It's a no office, isn't it? We don't have a firewall, strong firewall. We are relying on the firewall of the broadband router and the blacklisted IP addresses. So we are always vulnerable when you are working from home and connecting to the corporate networks. And we also tend to use different devices. For example, I may not use my official laptop, but I may use my tablet or mobile phone to connect to meetings and connect to the the servers of my workplace. And what are the impact from working from home? If something happens, if something goes wrong, your data can be lost, your reputation of your organization can be lost, and there can be some fines from data protection regulations. For example, some of you may know about the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR law in EU. So you are liable for 20% of your annual turnover, or 4% of your annual turnover, or 20 million pound fine if you leak personal data of EU citizens. So I'm sure similar laws will be in Indonesia and other countries as well. I think India is discussing a new law, data protection bill, so which is yet to be approved. So there will be huge fines for data leaks, and as well as identity frauds, loss of personal and financial information as well. And online learning, I think there's a huge risk for online learning as well. I think we are doing a bit of online learning even now. So I think this happened recently in London. About 50 schools were attacked through a ransomware attack, and they couldn't. I think it was all over the news during that week. And just few days back, in Hertfordshire University in London also attacked, so they couldn't. They take down all their services, so students couldn't do the online teaching, they access their emails or the learning environment. So since we are going towards more online distance learning, there's a high chance that cyber criminals will target this space in the future as well. And if you look back at some stats during 7th May and 7th June, so 87% of parents said they were homeschooling their kids during the peak of the pandemic. And online learning, of course, there are so many guidelines for parents as well as educators, but still there are ways to improve it as well. And this is about the infodemic I mentioned, information plus pandemic. So the WHO mentioned that there are many malicious campaigns saying that these guidelines are coming from WHO or your health department, but they are indeed coming from the cyber criminals. So this one happened in Mongolia. So there, most of the government organizations received emails saying that it is from the health department, but they had some malicious links and attachments. So this is a report from WHO. They said 5-fold increase in cyber attacks during the pandemic. So they have seen that there's a increased number of cyber attacks during COVID-19, and they provide some certain guidelines how to avoid misinformation, how to check the domain name, email addresses, and so on. Some guidelines to protect about this misinformation. Yeah, so these are few guidelines. Do not rush or feel under pressure. And if you even give sensitive information, of course, you can change your username and password so the criminals won't be able to use it again. And always there's a reporting email as well, contact details. So this is another study during COVID-19. So they said phishing emails were up 667% during the pandemic. So as you know, phishing is luring the unsuspecting individuals to click on links, so they will end up somewhere, or they may end up downloading a malicious code, so that will steal your data. And there are some improved versions of phishing. As students, some of you may know, spear phishing. They are specifically targeting particular organization or individuals rather than mass emailing the whole public in general. And whaling, they are targeting the senior management of the company rather than any specific organization, and different formats, the different mediums of phishing, SMS, social media, and voice phishing as well. And this is a sample phishing email which happened during COVID-19. So this is pretended to be coming from the neighbor, threatening that if you don't give this much of bitcoins, I will infect you with the coronavirus. So these were common during COVID-19, especially during the first wave of the pandemic. So how to protect against phishing, increase user awareness. I think these are general guidelines anyway. Technical solutions, anti-phishing tools, and of course reporting. So in UK, there's a particular email. You can suspected emails, you can send it to this email. So government will check the validity of those content and report it as well. I'm sure there will be in every country there will be some kind of reporting mechanism. So how to spot suspicious emails? So check for these authority, whether it is coming from WHO or the health authority, urgency, immediately you have to respond within 1 hour, immediately, emotions, scarcity for, let's say, face masks, vaccines. So let's say you get a sudden email to say that you have an opportunity to get the vaccine within 1 hour, click this link to register for the vaccination. So if you are in a urgency, you may go for it and you will end up in downloading a malicious software or revealing your sensitive information to the outside. Yeah. So most of the attacks nowadays are focusing more on the vaccine. So at the early stage, they were concentrating on the vaccine development, research, and there were a few hacks related to some countries. They accuse nation state type of attacks for certain countries. And this one in particular for San Francisco University Laboratory, they had to pay 1.14 million ransom to get their system and the applications back. And around in July, UK and America were accusing Russian hackers for trying to reach vaccine development research facilities across the US and UK. And at the distribution stage of the vaccines, they were saying that the cyber criminals were targeting the distribution chain, because some vaccines like Pfizer, Moderna, they need low temperatures to maintain throughout the supply chain. So there were certain attempts at targeting those distribution chains so that these nations can be ahead of other nations in terms of vaccine rollout and other details as well. And some of you may remember that the EMA, European Medical Agency, came under cyber attack and they steal some information submitted for the Pfizer vaccine approval. So these were the attacks targeting vaccine development and distribution. And these are few data. These are sometimes called indicators of compromise. So as you can see, starting from 2019 December, around the peak of the pandemic, first wave, March, April, there's a huge increase of cyber attacks because people started moving to the lockdown, working from home, distance learning, online teaching, online learning. So you can see the number of attacks. And these are the coronavirus related domain name registrations over the first period from December 2019 to end of April 2020. You can see there's a huge increase. I'm sure most of them are genuine domain name registrations, but some of them were flagged for malicious content and malicious purposes. And this is again the domain name registration, as you can see, for different purposes: post-corona, corona crisis, red one, corona kio, and corona relief payments. So as you can see, towards the end of April, people were more focusing on the corona kio. So you can see upward trend in domain name registrations. And this is another graph for Zoom. So as you can see, number of Zoom domains. Zoom is just a one company, but see how many domain names were registered with the keyword Zoom. So, so some of them were flagged for malicious content and malicious intent for these registrations. The other important aspect came during the COVID-19 is contact tracing. I'm sure in Indonesia and few other, most of the countries had some kind of physical contact tracing. Some countries use military to do the contact tracing. Some countries use GPS, some countries use footages, face recognition, and few privacy invasive approaches of contact tracing. But what would happen to our data when if they know where we were and what we did and how long we stayed in a particular place? So whether our data will be protected, our personal data, how long they will keep this data, how they would remove data after the COVID-19, and how securely they are storing our personal data. So there was a big argument around the privacy and these contract tracing efforts, whether during post-COVID era, whether they would use these similar approaches to track citizens, track individuals, so they would collect our privacy information. So we did a publication. You can check when you receive the PDF document, the privacy rights, violation of privacy rights during contact tracing. And there were a few things happened during COVID as well. I think it was reported the first death due to a ransomware attack in a German hospital. This is not directly related to COVID, but one patient died while transferring to a different hospital because the hospital system was locked by a ransomware attack. And there's a backstory around it. The hackers wanted to attack the nearby university. By mistake, they attacked the hospital. So by realizing the mistake, they gave away the key. But by the time they got the key and recovered their system, this patient died. So this was one of the things, one of the key news in the time. And the Twitter hack, this happened in July, around July 2020. There were some messages posted on high-profile Twitter handles, and about $100,000 were transferred to these Bitcoin addresses. I think this was started using a spear phishing attack, targeting several employees of Twitter, and then moving towards the administrators and so on. So there's a nice backstory around it. And recent high-profile attacks, I'm not going into detail. SolarWinds attacks, some of you may know, it is still on the news. And Microsoft Exchange attack, were targeting Microsoft Exchange servers. And recently, Facebook, LinkedIn, they reported a couple of high-profile attacks involving around 500,000 users. So these are the things in the news at the moment. And because of the time, I won't go to this one. So you can see some live threats using Checkpoint and few other tools available. I think when you are doing studies, you can play with these tools. So what were the observations during this research? What we observed, whether cyber criminals use different set of tools or whether they were using the same set of tools and using the opportunity created by the pandemic. Because most of us were online more than before, more than pre-COVID, and this created an opportunity for the cyber criminals to attack us more. So from our research as well as from the reported research in the literature, what we found is they didn't develop any new tools. They were using the same tools, but they utilized the opportunity created by the pandemic to attack individuals, organizations, and governments. So how to stay safe during COVID-19? Stay alert. Be alert what is happening around you, what is happening to your Facebook accounts, and follow best practices like two-factor authentication, use secure links for the websites like HTTPS, not the HTTP, and reduce your online footprint. So don't share too much information on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So these information, if a cyber criminal with the right intent will be able to create your whole profile using your social media accounts, as well as protect your biometrics. For example, face images, your fingerprints. Whenever you are giving fingerprint, just check where are they going, whether it is stored within the guidelines of the data protection laws or whether it is going outside of your country, and what are the security mechanisms around the biometrics. And because I mentioned social media, there's a open source intelligence, so there's a possibility that they can create the whole profile of you or the organization using the openly available tools. So what they could do, so personal information, they can use it for identity theft, ransom, bullying, and if you are an organization, they can check your LinkedIn profiles, the people who are working for the company, and identify what technologies they are using, whether they are using Windows platforms, Linux platforms, and then they can craft or direct social engineering attacks towards these particular employees so that they can initiate the work for stealing sensitive information. And this is one of my favorite pictures I use in my lectures. So you may have your state-of-the-art best security firewalls, the login auditing software, but if you are not aware of what to do and how to identify a phishing email, you will end up in the wrong side. So it is important to increase the awareness of your employees, your students, your clients. So that is the key. So you don't have to wait till you go to the university. You can start in UK, especially. They are saying that from the age of 10, 11, you have to start giving bit about cybersecurity, how to protect your privacy, how to protect your data, and so on. So that will create a good citizen who's privacy aware and security concerned. So when they join a company, it doesn't matter whether it is a security position or a HR position, they will make sure they will be in a better mindset to identify a phishing email and maybe not clicking a malicious link, and so on. So that is where we should start, rather than waiting till the university or the further education. So we did several publications around the things that I discussed, especially around the phishing attacks and how to minimize the cybersecurity threats during COVID-19, and security and privacy issues around coronavirus diagnosis and prognosis. I'm sure the organizers will send you the PDF of this presentation upon request, so you can go and read a bit more about this, our work as well. Now is the question and answer session, Riska. So I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation, Prof. Chaminda Hewage. And now, for participant, if there is any question, you can ask in the link that provided by the committee, or you can directly raise your hand. If there is any question for Prof. Chaminda.
Riska, are there any
yes.
questions on the chat? Or?
Actually, in the question and answer form, still no question yet.
Even though if you are not asking questions, so feel free to contact me or the ITS Global. So I'm happy to answer any further questions even after this lecture as well.
Thank you very much, Prof. Chaminda. Maybe I will ask one question. Okay, during this pandemic, can you give us some tips to increase our security while we doing online course? You know that as your presentation before, that not every internet connection in our house is safe, something like that. So do you mind if you have give us some tips to increase our security?
Yeah, thanks, Riska. I think I mentioned in one of the slides as well. So I think what we need to do, not something different, but we have to be stay alert more than before. because we are always connected. I mean, we are working from home and our kids are doing online learning through their platforms. So we have to make sure that we are using the correct links and whether the link is secure, for example, HTTPS, so that we know that the data between your browser and the server is encrypted, and few other things like two-factor authentication. So whenever you want to log into your online banking, you will get a message to your mobile phone. Sometimes we feel it is a burden. It is too much work to log into your mobile phone, mobile banking account. But I think we should make sure that we enable two-factor authentication for most of our services, so that even though it takes a bit time to retrieve your text message and enter the one-time password, but these processes make you more secure. And I think what everyone believes is this online presence will remain even after COVID-19. So I think I can see many students are here. So they will start to engage in their studies online in the future as well. So they have to make sure that their devices are strong, and as well as the use of social media applications. I think you have to think a bit more before you start sharing your photos on Facebook, Instagram. So there are people out there who could create the whole profile of you and use it for identity theft and so on, especially around the biometrics, like your face images, your fingerprints and other things. So once the biometrics are leaked, uh, I mean, gone outside, you can't recover it, isn't it? Because you can change your password, but you can't change your fingerprint. So once it is gone, it is gone. So these are the key things. And what I would say, use the right tools, and I'm sure the telecommunication service providers will do a bit of security, increase the security of their connections to the home users and so on. But apart from that, you do your bit as well. You can make sure that you are accessing the right link with the secure connection, and do two-factor authentication and few other good cyber hygiene will leave you at the right place. Hope I answered your question, Dr. Rishka.
Oh yes, it's answered my question clearly. Thank you very much. So this is there is one more answer or one more question. Oh, there is two questions actually. The first question from Muhammad Zakwan. This week there is a case related to an Indonesian phisher who tackled about $75 million from the COVID donation website in US using the US resident deviation data. In my view, there is no action in solving this problem with the technical program, but it's coming from the user awareness. So my question is, what is the priority action that programmers can do in order to control the phishing attack? Is the program purposing to increase the user awareness or just a technical program that can help them automatically?
Yeah, I can't, from what you said. So for the phishing attacks, there can be some technical solutions. For example, how to detect phishing attacks, how to detect phishing URLs. So there are many activities around. I think since there are many students, so there are many ways that you can detect phishing URLs using machine learning and artificial intelligence. So there are many techniques you can detect them technically, but as as you said, but the security use awareness is the key. So you should educate the employees, users, how to detect a phishing attack. So what are the urgencies used by the phishers? For example, I mentioned a couple of factors. They will use it all the time: authority, urgency. So how to tackle them? So whenever you get a call, how to make sure that it is coming from the bank. So if you have this trained mindset, if you have gone through the required training, and this training should happen regularly, not like once per year. So it has to be regular, every 6 months, every 3 months, and to identify the upcoming emerging threats so that they can detect it appropriately. So you can't just rely on the technology. So user awareness is the key to minimize these attacks. So, and create a mindset to detect, because don't rely on anything unless it is you are 100% confident that it is coming from the right source, and you are whenever you are clicking a link, make sure that it is you can check before clicking. You can right click and see the link itself. So it may look like Microsoft, but there may be one letter or one number after Microsoft 1, Microsoft 2. So that means it's a malicious website. So I would say it's 50-50. You need to have the right technology, as well as 50% belongs to us to make sure that we are doing the right thing. I hope I answered the question, but I was not clear. Some parts were not clear when you dictated to me. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Chami. So the next question is from Maulida Merisdiana. Is there any specification target that attacker want to steal their data, or specific user that targeting by attacker?
Is he asking about data storage, Rizka?
Stole their data. I read again the question. Is there any specification target that attacker want to steal their data?
Rizka, can I see the question here on
okay,
Zoom?
okay. I will.
Okay, is there
yes.
any specific specific target that attacker want to store their data? Yeah, I mean, attackers want to steal data for two purposes. One is to steal your personal data. Yeah, it can be employee personal data, or it can be your client's personal data. So personal data is has a huge privacy concern. I think most data protection regulations around the world. The most prominent one is the GDPR in EU. So they say that all our personal data should be protected by the controllers. So let's say you are a university. You get your all applications, you are storing all student applications. So in a student application, you have your name, address, your next of kin, date of birth, and every personal detail. So if you are a university, you should make sure that all student applications are stored securely, so no one can't access. So if it is leaked to the outside, that you are violating the personal privacy of the students. Yeah. So that is one part of it. And the hackers, other intention of the hacker is to steal corporate information. So it can be intellectual property rights, your designs, your publications. So if it is a university, so these are the other intention of the hackers, which is more financial oriented. So they will extract those data and ask them to pay money, and they will threaten that if you don't pay a ransom, I will post it to the dark web so that everyone can access. So the companies will be worried and they will start paying the ransom, even though it is not reported to the public media. There's a high trend in the organization. They will pay this ransom to protect their data. So there are two intentions. One to steal personal data, which is highly valuable, and you can take down a company as well. So let's say you are a small company and you are holding European citizen data. And if you steal that data, and you may be liable for £20 million fine, or 4% of your annual turnover. So that is a huge fine. That company can go down easily because of this fine. So that's why it is important to protect it. Hope I answered, Rizka.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Chami. So there is two more questions. This is the question from Ertansa Rafirianto. The question is, how we know if our information, especially in email, are being leaked in some website? Because recently, my friend have an email notif to change password, even though they doesn't know anything about it. Maybe there is a tips for Prof. Chami about this.
Yeah, there are few places. Yeah, let me read the question on the chat.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think this is more related to the phishing emails, I would say, because you can check whether this email is you can check whether it is coming from the right person, whether from the right email address with the right domain name, and whether the links mentioned on the email is the right email, so that then you, if you click on such link, sometimes you may complete a form, say that it is ITS global registration for an event, but that information will be collected by someone else from a different website. It looks like ITS global website, but it may be a duplicate website created by the hackers. So that could be a way of detecting it. So there's a website I will put in. There's a website called Have I Been Prone? So from there, if you go there and type your email address, it will show you whether your email has been hacked before. So you can have an idea whether it has been hacked. So if it is reported there, it is always better to change your password of your Yahoo and Google emails. So there are places that you can check whether your email has been hacked in a previous cyber incident. Yeah. Thanks, Baskoro. So the link is here. So you all can check whether your email has been subjected to any attacks.
Okay, Prof. This one, oh, there is two more questions. There's a new question here.
Yeah.
So the question is, can phishing be detected via network traffic, or can only be identified from the header message? Let's say as DDoS can be detected from packet traffic. Maybe there is input that can be used as a research topic because I'm interested in taking the topic of network security, especially DDoS or maybe phishing detection. Thank you very much. This is the question from Alifa Media Kaupsar.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Dr. Rizka. Let me read the question on the chat as well. Yeah. Yeah, I think you may be able to detect phishing emails if you do a bit of deep packet filtering, because when you are doing network packet filtering, sometimes you don't go up to the application layer where you can see the image and the email address it is coming from. But if you do bit of deep packet filtering, probably you can detect some blacklisted domain names and email addresses that these emails are coming from. Yeah, so if it is coming from a blacklisted IP address or the email domain name, probably it can detect. But most of the time, some of the applications, so they tackle this at the application level. For example, once the email received to the mail client, they can do a bit of filtering where it is coming from, whether it is suspected, whether it has suspected wording or spelling mistakes, and few other details will say that it is a phishing email, not from the right, not a genuine email. So yes, you could do it at the network level or at the application level. So it depends how easy for us to do it, how much effort we need it for it, whether it is easy for us to track it at the application side rather than relying on the network side. So it depends how we want to approach it. Hope I answered, Dr. Rizka.
Thank you very much for the answer, Prof. Chami. So this is the last question from Ika Oktavianawati. What about doing any online bank transaction? Is it safe? And do you have any metric to show in what area or what country or city it often happen? The data stealing.
Yeah, I think it is okay to do online bank transaction as long as you have to make sure that you are accessing a secure link, HTTPS with the secure socket layer link. So your communication between your browser and the bank is encrypted. So you don't have to worry about someone interfering to your communication. As well as if you're using banking, I highly suggest to use two-factor authentication. Use one-time password or a token given to you by the bank. So then they will make sure that you are the right person using more than one channel. So they will check by your username and password. Also, they will check by the one-time password sent to your mobile phone or the token created by the token given to you by the university. Yes, I think it will be the future, online banking. So if you use these platforms, the two-factor authentication and strong passwords, of course, and if you make sure that you are accessing the right online banking website, not a fake one with which looks similar, you will be in a better position. So the second question, any metrics show what areas often happen data stealing? So there's no particular area, I would say. Of course, the cyber criminals like bigger corporations because there's more money in them, so they can get some useful information and then ask ransom for them to pay for it. So it is like any other crime. So they will always target the high profile organizations, and they may, in UK, the charities are being hacked. So charities are to give money to people, isn't it? But they are also being hacked, because even though charities give money to people, they have a huge amount of money in them with them to distribute for different activities. So it is not. I wouldn't say it is specific to a European country or Indonesia or Japan. It is happening everywhere. But as long as you have the good cyber hygiene from the beginning of your primary school, secondary school, up to the university level, so then it will be very difficult for the cyber criminals to track you down. So it is, that's why I said the security awareness is the key. If you do the right thing, security education, then your country will be less affected rather than affected in a significant scale. I can see another question, Dr.
Yes.
Rizka. Shall I read it? Yeah.
Yes, this is from Mr. Adi Utama.
Yeah.
One of cybersecurity layer is human layer. It is about how humans manage their security. Recently, we use our gadget too much, and our fatigue lead into human mistake for cybersecurity. What do you think about it, and what is your tips?
Thank you, Dr. Rizka. I think that's a quite good question. Thank you for that question, because this is a very much a research question at the moment. So why people still click on malicious links? So sometimes the cyber criminals play with our emotions, our mood, and the time of the day. So where at the in the morning when you come to the office, there are about 100 emails in our mailbox. So we are in a hurry to go through the mailbox. So we may by mistake will click on the link, as the Utama said, the fatigue, the different emotions in our capacity. Well, for example, by the end of the day, around 5 o'clock, before we leave the office, if we receive an email, we are very much reluctant to read the email properly. So we may end up clicking the link, and we may end up in a wrong place, malicious website. So that's quite true. I think this is a very good research area to study. If you are a student or a master student or BSc student, this is quite a good area. So why people, even with the good security awareness, why people still click on malicious links and they fail to identify phishing emails and so on? That's a good question. Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe that's the last question. Thank you very much for the time and the interesting presentation that you have been shared with us, Prof. Chaminda. So before you leaving the session, our committee will give you the certificate. Yes, I will give this session back to the MC to give you the certificate.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rizka. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. Bye.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Chaminda Hewage, and of course, Dr. Rizka for moderating this insightful session. Before Before that, I would like to present a certificate awarding to our honorable speaker, Associate Professor Hewage. This is the certificate presented for Associate Professor Chaminda as a speaker for today's guest lecture.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Chami.
So for the next session, we have our second speaker, Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo from Research Center of IoT and Defense System Technology, ITS. So Dr. Baskoro got a bachelor degree and master degree in informatics at ITS Indonesia, and he also got the PhD in computer science at Cardiff University, UK, specialization in network security and machine learning. For the professional experience, from 2010 till now, he's a lecturer at Informatics Department, ITS, and from October 2020 till March 2021, he's a research assistant at School of Computer Science and Informatics, Cardiff University, UK. He also got a professional certification as a certified ethical hacker by Easy Council, and he has professional knowledge and skill in programming languages, information system development, system and networking, administration, and network security and penetration testing. So for Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo, time is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Rizka. Just gonna share my screen. Oh, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it clearly.
Right. Thank you for the opportunity to give a talk about my research. So yeah, as Dr. Rizka just introduced myself, my name is Baskoro. Usually in Cardiff, I go by Adi. It's just simply because it's easier to pronounce. So today I'm gonna talk about my research during my PhD about the intelligent low-rate cyber attack detection. But before that, probably just a little bit, most of them has been explained previously. So yeah, I got my undergrad and I did my undergrad and master at the Institute of Technology 10 November, Surabaya, and I just finished my PhD. So I just came back from the UK about 3 weeks ago, actually, in Cardiff. Yeah, so my research interests involve network security, malware detection, reverse engineering, and a bit of machine learning or deep learning for security. So if anyone have the same interest, feel free to contact me. Maybe we can do some research collaboration. Okay, so before going to the talk, there are a few things that I need to explain, so bear with me. If you want, you can, if you're already familiar with the topic, you can leave for probably 15 or 10 minutes, because I'm going to explain some basic terminologies, and then I'm going to go deeper into the network traffic data sets, what they are, which one to use, and why we have to use the data sets. And then finally, we'll go into the my research about the low-rate cyber attack detection. Okay, let's crack on. So first, what is a low-rate attack actually? So there are different or various type of attacks, and we have to define what low-rate attack is. So basically, a low-rate attack is an attack that silently infiltrates networks, systems, or applications to compromise them, steal information, or maintain access. So if you're familiar with DDoS, denial of service, probing, fuzzing, so those attacks are not low-rate attacks because they generate a huge amount of traffic and can be identified by the change of the rate of the network traffic itself. So what attacks can be considered as low-rate attack? There are 3 attacks. The first thing is an exploit. So an exploit is essentially a piece of software or a piece of code, can be also a chunk of data or a sequence of commands that takes advantage of a bug or vulnerability in a system that cause unintended or unanticipated behavior. A good example of an exploit is an SQL injection attack. So we can sell an SQL command to a website, and then the website, instead of providing the correct data, they just do or they just execute the command that we just gave them. And an exploit, typically, they also contain or carries something that's called exploit payload. So it's another piece of code that will be executed once the host's been compromised. So if the exploit is kind of like the key to get into the system and do whatever you want, the exploit payload is the thing that you do inside the system. It can be something to control the server, or it can be something that destroy the data, anything. And the payload itself, because it's a piece of code, it can be in many forms. It can be in machine code, it can be in a scripting language like PHP, Python, or Ruby, or it can also be in form of OS commands like Linux shell or PowerShell in Windows. The next attack I'm going to talk about is a backdoor. So a backdoor, as the name implies, is a typical covert method of bypassing normal authentication or encryption in a computer, product, embedded devices, or other things. So typically, an attacker, they want to plan a backdoor in a system just in case their initial door to get into the system was closed. So the perfect example of a backdoor is web shell. So usually during the attack, the adversary will first exploit the vulnerability, and then they will somehow upload the web shell code into the web server. And then once the web shell is already in the server, they can do many things with the web shell. For example, like uploading another piece of malware, or they can control the server. They can also remove the logs, for example, and many other things, many dangerous things. And unfortunately, this kind of attack often happen in university websites. So another good example, or another big example of a backdoor, is Syskit vector. So it's a type of vector used by a group called Tortoise Shell. They compromise several oil company networks in Saudi Arabia, and they planted this vector into their servers and then control the whole network. And the loss of caused by this incident was huge. And the next attack that we considered as a low-rate attack is a worm. So a computer worm is basically a standalone malware. But the key that differentiates worm than any other malware is the ability to replicate itself in the network and then spread to other computers. So the perfect example of this attack is the WannaCry attack. So the three type of attacks that I just mentioned, they're not mutually exclusive. So an attack can be considered as exploit and worms, which is the case with WannaCry, because the WannaCry use the exploits stolen from the NSA, and then that exploit was used to propagate the malware or the ransomware in this case automatically in the network. So if the when the WannaCry sees any open file sharing, Windows file sharing, it will just replicate itself. So should you care about them? The short answer is yes. If the short answer is no, I wouldn't be here. So why then? Why the question is, why should we care about them? Because from the report compiled by McAfee Labs, denial of service, which is not a low-rate attack, has quite low percentage compared to the other attacks. But in the research, so we did a study and then we mapped or we list which research focus on the high-rate attacks like DDoS, probe, fuzzers, or botnets, and which research focus on exploits, vectors, and worms. And the result is most of the research from 2015 to 2020, they mostly focus on high-rate attacks instead of low-rate attacks, although the data itself shows that low-rate attacks are more prevalent than high-rate attacks.
Relevant.
Okay. And then the next question is, how do we detect these cyber attacks? There are two main categories on how we detect this kind of attack. First is if we use the host-based detection, we can monitor the log files of the system or the system or API calls. So for example, if software calls a specific Windows API, that might be a sign of ransomware or other type of malware, basically. Or we can also look at the memory content, or or the other type of detection is we can rely on the network level by reading the network traffic, which was my focus during this research. And if we go deeper, we can also categorize the network-based intrusion detection. So there are signature-based. This is the first type of the NIDS. So the signature-based IDS refers to the detection of attacks by looking for specific patterns, such as byte sequences in network traffic or known malicious instruction sequences used by malware. So as an example, if you're not familiar with how exploit works, so to make sure that an exploit or a shell code works, there's a specific byte that always used by the attacker called the no operation code, and the byte value is 90 in hexadecimal. And what the signature-based NIDS do to identify this kind of attacks is by looking at this specific byte code. It's quite effective, I must say, but the problem with this one is if they change the code, because there are several no operation code that can be used. It's not only the byte 90 or 90. There are several other code that can be used by the attackers. And how do we cope up with the evolving attacks? And the problem with the main problem with the signature-based NIDS is it can't identify attacks that hasn't been in their rule-based system yet. So if the administrator doesn't provide the rule for a specific attack, and then that attack happened, that means the NIDS wouldn't be able to detect that specific attack. So it has the database or the list of rules has to be updated manually by the attacker, which is why there's another type of NIDS called anomaly-based NIDS. So this NIDS is basically an IDS for detecting network intrusion and misuse by learning the system behavior and classifying the traffic as either normal or anomalous using either statistical or machine learning models. So if you imagine what anomaly-based NIDS is, it's like training a baby to read the network traffic, to read and to remember the network traffic, and then try to find some kind of deviation or some kind of not pattern. It's more like behavior of the normal traffic and behavior of malicious traffic. So instead of relying on a specific bytes or specific rules, this kind of NIDS is more flexible. And so how do we ANIDS or ANIDS identify malicious traffic? There are two kind of approaches that usually pursued. The first is the header-based NIDS, and the second is payload-based NIDS. It refers to the state that a network packet contains two parts, the header data and the payload data. So if you see at the picture, there's an IP header and the TCP or UDP header. It contains information such as the IP addresses, time to leave, port, or the time-related traffic, like time-related information, like the rate of incoming packets or the rate of outgoing packets, that kind of stuff. So any NIDS that uses this kind of data can be considered as header-based NIDS. But if you go deeper into the upper layer, actually, the application layer message, you can see more data. So you can see the HTTP requests or responses, FTP commands or data, and SMTP messages, or any other application layer protocol. Okay. And then a spoiler alert, because my research is focused more on the payload base and ideas, because we can see more data, and because low rate attacks tend to hide itself in the traffic, it doesn't have really distinguished header-based information. And how do we evaluate the NIDS? So the ideal way of evaluating an NIDS is by running it against the real traffic. But the problem with that is it's hard to reproduce, because the basic of science is how to make the result reproducible. So instead of relying on the real traffic, we can also rely on the publicly available data set. So there are some network traffic, most of them are well labeled. So you know which part of traffic is malicious, which part of traffic is benign. And the needs for data set raise a question that, do we have a representative data set for low rate attacks? And then we go to our first point. So to answer that question, we define, or we propose 7, 6 plus 1 metrics. The one is the last one is the optional metric to measure the representativeness of the existing data set, or how well the data set represent the low rate attacks or contain good attacks that can be that are quite similar to the one that we see in real life. So the first metric is the age. If we consider the data set to be good if it's less than 5 years old since the research was done. So it's from if it's from 2015 or younger, it's good. And then whether the dataset contain network traffic in pickup format, because some datasets, they only provide the pre-processed information. So we don't have the raw information to play with. Then whether the malicious traffic is labeled based on its attack type. So some dataset, they only have information whether the traffic is benign or malicious, while we need the information if it's malicious, what kind of attack generated the data, if it whether they generated by a high rate attack or the low rate attack. And then the ratio of low rate attacks over the malicious traffic in the data set, whether the data set contain duplicate records, and then whether the data set contain more than one protocol. So if they contain attacks in HTTP, FTP, SMTP, and many others, that's a good data set. So the result, we compared six data sets from DARPA 99, KDD CUP 99, NSL KDD, which is the kind of upgrade of the KDD 99, and then ICX 12, UNSW NB 15, and KTech dataset. So from this study, we can see that the UNSW NB15 is actually the best dataset that we have, but the only problem is it contains some duplicate records, and the proportion of low rate attacks over the overall malicious traffic is quite small. So in my research, we generated a new data set which has more low-rate attacks. And it can be used as a complement to the UNSW NP15. So how did we generate the data? Because we wanted to focus more on the payload. We didn't make like a complicated network. So we just created a simple network with one attacker at one side, a router in the middle, and two vulnerable VMs on the other side. So a metasploitable VM is a VM that contains vulnerable services, and the Debian VM contains an old Debian with old or vulnerable WordPress website. And then we launched the attack from the attacker VM to these two VMs using Metasploit, and collected the data. And then we filtered out some traffic, or sorry, some attacks that didn't generate any traffic or failed to execute. Okay. And then that data was used for the subsequent research about the unsupervised approach for low-rate attack detection. So before going further with the research, I would like to explain the background of it. So in machine learning or the supervised approach, the usual way to teach a model is by giving them examples or samples of legitimate and malicious traffic. And then they will learn, the model will learn the difference between legitimate and malicious traffic. But the problem with this approach is when the data is imbalanced. So if the amount of legitimate traffic is when the amount of legitimate traffic is much bigger than the amount of the number of samples in the malicious traffic, the model itself will lean toward guessing all traffic as legitimate. While still giving high accuracy. Which is always the case in network traffic, because the amount of malicious traffic is really tiny compared to the amount of legitimate traffic. So then, because we have to use the anomaly, we have to use the kind of unsupervised approach, the challenge itself is how we define a normal behavior of the network traffic, what can be considered as normal. And when I was thinking about that, I looked at the network traffic itself. So the picture on the left is the one that you see on your monitor when you are accessing a Google website. And then the picture on the right is the actual data that was being transmitted from your computer to Google server. And if you look at the data itself, it's actually like a text-based document. So I was wondering if we use text classification approach to identify malicious traffic. So the first approach that we did was we looked at the byte frequencies of the payload, so of the HTTP messages or FTP commands or SMTP messages. So if I plot, when I plot the data, the histogram of the byte frequency, so the number of occurrence of byte, let's say 0, 1, 2, 3 until 255, you can see this pattern. So the twin tower at the top, at the most left diagram is the byte number 10 and 13, which is the new line code in Linux, CR and LF. They always show similar patterns, but with the malicious traffic, the byte distribution is quite different. As you can see, sometimes they have really high amount of certain byte, or sometimes they use non-printable bytes on the right side. So the question is, how do we differentiate between the normal byte frequencies and the malicious byte frequencies? So we use something, a method called autoencoders. So an autoencoder is basically a unsupervised learning algorithm that applies backpropagation, setting the target values to be equal to the inputs. So it's like training a compression algorithm and then decompress the data so that the side effect of compression and the decompression is removing some noises so that we get a cleaner representation of our original data. So like in the picture, we have like fancy mushroom, and then we have the output of the algorithms. We have the learned representation, like the less fancy one, but we can see that it's still a mushroom. And then this method can be used also as an outlier detection by calculating the difference between the input and the output. So the key here is if the output is not that different from the input, that means it's normal data, because we recognize it, we can deconstruct data easily. But if the I'm sorry. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we still can see your presentation.
Okay. Yeah. And when the autoencoder receives an input that is quite different from the usual, it will output something different. So let's say if it's usually used to recognize mushroom, if a mushroom is fed into the algorithm, it will output something close to the mushroom itself. But if we put, let's say, a carrot into the algorithm, because it's quite different than mushroom, the algorithm will try to compress and decompress the data. The result is something that's quite different from the carrot. So the difference between the output and the input would be quite high. And yeah, that is basically the approach we did. So from the application layer messages, we extract the byte frequencies and feed it into the autoencoder model. And then we compare the reconstructed byte frequencies. If the difference is not that high, we consider it as normal or legitimate. If the difference is high, like the one at the bottom, we consider it as malicious. But the question is, how different, or what's the threshold when we say that it's malicious or not? I'll come back to it later, because in another approach, instead of using the byte frequencies, we were using the byte sequences. So we kind of split the data into smaller chunks, and then using this algorithm called recurrent neural network, we tell the algorithm to predict the next item in the sequence. And the idea is if the algorithm successfully guess the next item in the sequence more often, we can say that the application layer messages, or the application layer message is benign or legitimate. But if the algorithm failed to detect or failed to guess the next item in the sequence, we can say that this the input to the algorithm is malicious. So how do we, of course, we need to measure the performance. There are some metrics that we could have been used, but we decided to go with detection rate, or some would say it's a recall, calculated from the true positive divided by true positive plus false negative. And then to see the false positive rate, because we want to find the balance between detection rate and false positive rate. We don't want to have a 100% detection rate with also 100% false positive rate, because the administrator would lose the confidence to our system. And to combine these two metrics, we use the F2 score. It's because we need to put more emphasis on the detection rate, because we don't want to miss any attack. And the result, we compare our approaches on the left with some previous works, whether they're using payload-based or header-based detection. So the yellow box is the one that uses header-based detection, and the red box is the one that uses payload-based detection. So let me come back to the threshold again. So we didn't choose a specific value for the threshold, but we use a statistical method to define the threshold. So the usual statistical method to define an outlier is by using mean and standard deviation. But the problem with mean and standard deviation is they're not suitable for non-normal distribution. So we have to use something else, which is called TIQR and Z-score. And then if you see the RNN-OD here, there's an anomaly score. Let me go back to the previous slide. So if you use the binary anomaly score, if the predicted output is different than the actual output, that means it's false, and we consider that as one error, and then all the error will be sum. And with the floating anomaly score, we also calculated the distance. So if the actual output is, let's say, a letter A, and then the predicted output is a letter G, it's the difference is like 7 or 6. So the result is the best performing method is the RNN-OD with quite high detection rate, and with a slight increase in the false positive rate. And as we predicted earlier, the header-based detection, most of the header-based detection failed to detect any low-ret attacks in our dataset. And as the future work, we need to focus more on the binary protocols, because in the previous research, we only focus on the text-based protocols like HTTP, FTP, SMTP, and so on. And we also would like to try our approach on the encrypted channel. All right. Thank you for your time, and I'll return the floor to Dr. Rizka.
Okay, thank you very much for the insightful presentation, Dr. Baskoro. So I will check the question. Maybe there is some question. So in the question and answer form, still no question yet. For the participant, if you want to ask directly to Dr. Baskoro, you can raise hand or write in the chat message. So this is there's a question from Ertansa Rafirianto. The question is, out of curiosity, few years ago, there's a popular spam message with black dot in WhatsApp that can make the app crash when we click on it. Is it an exploit or just a simple bug? And talking about messaging apps, most of them are using end-to-end encryption. How safe it is exactly? Thank you.
Okay, so there are basically two questions. The first question is about the can you copy paste and
Yes.
question in the chat, please?
Okay, I will copy it into chat message. Can you see it? Yes.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with the black dot in WhatsApp. It was during my PhD. I wasn't really aware of it, but there was an exploit in WhatsApp where you can send a video, if I'm not mistaken. And if you open that video, your WhatsApp account can be compromised and can be used by the attacker. But the bug itself, if you have updated your WhatsApp, should be safe from from that exploit. And then talking about the end-to-end encryption, how safe it is. It depends on how we define what safe is. If in the matter of confidentiality, I think it is quite safe because the messages are encrypted from your phone to the recipient's phone, and vice versa. The provider itself shouldn't be able to read the data, and it's quite hard or infeasible to steal the data from the end-to-end encrypted messages. Does that answer the question?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Baskoro. So for the next question, we have a question from Stephen Cantor from Netherlands. The question is, do you think hackers can also give a positive stimulation to a big company and tech user? For example, looking at the weakness of the tech system in their company and create awareness of their vulnerabilities.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there's a big program called Bug Bounty. So in that program, the company can offer some rewards to hackers that can find any vulnerabilities or bugs in their system. And as far as I know, it's been quite successful. So instead of illegally attacking the company's website, they can legally attack them and get some money out of it. So yes, that's one of the successful program of Bug Bounty.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Baskoro. So the next
Yes.
question from Mr. Adi Utama. How should we consider computer resource, RAM processor, and extract of our type of attack or our IDS? Thank you.
Please correct me if I understood the question incorrectly. So in my understanding, the question asking about what if we use computer resources to detect attack instead of network traffic. I think that's what the person means. I haven't had any experience with the data. I did have some experience with other type of malware. The use of computer resources to identify malware is also quite promising, and there are some open research questions that we can use or we can pursue further to identify the malware. There's a research from a colleague of mine at Cardiff University where she collected the data from malware over 5 seconds and then shut down the application if it's considered as malicious. So it's, yeah, and then the result is quite promising.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Dr. Baskoro. I think that's the last question. And may I ask one question?
Sure.
So for your research, that's an interesting research. So using supervised and unsupervised, which one is get a better performance for in your research?
In my research area, I did brief experiment with the supervised learning. The problem with the supervised learning is when they have to detect attacks that has not been seen in the training data. Mm-hmm. So they perform poorly when they don't or they haven't recognized the data yet. But the unsupervised, the challenge with the unsupervised learning is how do we lower the false positive rate, because that affects the trust of the administrator to our system.
Yes. So for the supervised, we also need a lot of data, something like that, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Baskoro, for the presentation, and thank you for joining with us today. After this, the committee will give you the certification as today's speaker. So I'll give back the forum to the MC.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo, for the excellent lecture today. And thank you as well to Dr. Rizka Sholika for moderating this insightful session. Please give applause to our speaker and moderator by using the Zoom reaction feature. Furthermore, we would like to present a certificate awarding to our speaker and also our moderator today. This is the certificate presented for Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo as a speaker for today's guest lecture. And next, this is the certificate presented for Dr. Rizka Sholika as the moderator. Once again, thank you very much to Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo for the very informative lecture, and thank you as well to Dr. Rizka Sholika for moderating today's guest lecture series. I would like to humbly call on to Dr. Octavianti Dwi Wahyurini as Senior Manager of ITA's Global Engagement Office on Promotion and Mobility to give a few remarks.
Hello, Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? I hope everyone is in a good health this almost evening. I know this is almost iftar or buka puasa, and everybody was excited and their mind is not here in this, maybe in the kitchen or thinking about what to eat in the next hour. I would like to thank Dr. Baskoro and also Dr. Rizka for make this event happening, and thank you for your very insightful presentation, Dr. Baskoro, and also for Dr. Rizka for moderating this session. We really appreciate it, and also for all the attendees, all the students who are who's joining this event. It's remarkable. We have 200 participants today. We hope that tomorrow we will also have a good show up. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Otavianti. And once again, thank you to Dr. Rizka and Dr. Baskoro Adi Pratomo. Now, before we end our session for today, we invite all participants as well as the honorable speaker and moderator to take a group photo together. To all participants, please open your cameras. Okay, thank you. We will start for the first slide. 1, 2, 3, smile. And to the second slide. 1, 2, 3, smile. And third slide. 1, 2, 3, smile. Great. Now we finished the group photo. For the participants, please fill the feedback form through the link bit.ly/feedbackgls that you can also see on the Zoom chat room. The deadline for filling in the feedback form is 1 hour after we finish this session. We want to remind you that the participants who will get the stamp are the participants who come on time, join this event until the end, and also fill the feedback form. Before we close the event, we would like to remind all of you that tomorrow we will have the topic of new innovations in photonics technology with honorable speaker, Professor Sulaiman Wadi Harun from the University of Malaya. So make sure you don't miss another insightful guest lecture tomorrow. Finally, we have reached the end of today's guest lecture series, and we sincerely apologize for any mistakes we may have made in presenting as Masters of Ceremony and Comedy. I, Ori, as MC, bids farewell. Good afternoon, and we will see you again tomorrow at the GLS.
Thank you, Bu Oyin.
Yeah,
Bu
thank you,
Widyastuti,
Pak Irfan. Thank you, Pak
Pak
Baskoro.
Adi. Terima kasih, Bang. Thank you.
Udah dokter ternyata ya. Terima kasih Bu Oyin juga.
Terima kasih Bu Widyastuti.
Pak Baskoro ini biasanya kalau gemastik suka hacker ya. Sekarang hacker.
Ya, ini butuh merangkul memang. Matur nuwun semuanya. Selamat berbuka puasa.